Bleach was a shonen I watched all the way back when I was a wee lad and thought it was peak fiction. It isn't. So I recently finished rewatching all 366 episodes to refresh my memory for the upcoming season, and it certainly wasn't a fun experience. I'd have had a much more fun experience being verbally shit on, "You're worthless!" than watching through this again, as it was my own personal hell. But at least Ichigo's every encounter went the same exact way. I'm here to win! Oh. The Bleach anime, since the manga itself is pretty good from what I've read, has always had the issue of god-awful animation, direction, and pacing. Whenever it had the time and wanted to be good, you'd get scenes like Shuhei versus the Urankar and Ichigo versus Kagerosa in the filler, but by and large, you typically get padded scenes of characters standing around expositing what literally just happened.
At the exact moment of impact, you adjusted to the enemy's speed and were
Bro, I
able
literally
to
just
deflect
watched it. In comparison to Naruto, something that's also a long runner and animated by the same studio, you can tell which was the favorite of the bunch, because whereas Naruto would get scenes like this, Bleach would get scenes like this.
Use your bankai, Nino!
And was all around shafted for the most part. On the upside, the new anime does look good, but it doesn't excuse how awful most of its 366 episode run was, which is a shame because there's clearly passion in the staff working on it that shines in some episodes, namely the entirety of the Fullbring arc, but the passion doesn't make up for everything else being a solid 2 out of 10, excluding this one scene here of Tosen.
Ah, Kaname. I see you're spying on our intruders.
Come take a look at what's happening.
In general, the anime, likely because it was always about to catch up to the manga, had a horrible issue of not letting scenes speak for themselves so as to pad the runtime, as they'd instead have things like episode 295, where Aizen drops this big reveal that he was responsible for every fight of Strawberry up until this point, and then rather than letting that sink in with some accompanying music, they instead spend the rest of the fucking episode on recap, and then it carries over to the next episode. But at least they finally played number 1 on cue. The writing itself has always been solid, with the exception of Soul Society, but that's because Kubo was slowly finding his way and style that he'd stick with for the rest of the series, as in Soul Society we would see things like actual planned out battles with everyone having a unique way of fighting, like in Ichigo versus Ikaku, later be thrown out the window because Kubo knew he wasn't very good at drawing those kinds of fights, and so instead he opted to go the more aesthetic route that relied primarily on the flair and flashiness in fights rather than the gritty combat, and this is best exemplified by how sexy Stark becomes after transforming. Oh, that's a man. The aesthetics and flair were always what Kubo was best at, because Ichigo is always drip the fuck out. So as a result, the Soul Society is more of a testing ground and doesn't represent what the series would become later on, outside of all the foreshadowing, of course, which is why you have shit taste if you think Bleach peaked at Soul Society. Yeah, I said it. Especially when the anime takes it a step forward and absolutely ruins the arc with its dog shit pacing and animation. From Soul Society onward, however, Kubo greatly improves on what he's good at, which is shitposting, trolling, and good writing, among other things, and you wind up with a series that gets better and better as it goes on. With legendary moments like Aizen standing up to be strong. Since when were you under the impression I wasn't a shitposter? Yami being a shitpost on power level, Strawberry's fights all being planned, leading to him winning and losing on purpose rather than because of the plot convenience, as if Kubo was specifically parroting shows that did rely on that, and the entirety of Tosen versus Kaname being one big blind joke, what with Kaname being a blind guy who's blinded by revenge yet knows no prejudice, only to gain eyesight and immediately become jaded and sling insults at Dog for being a dog. It's even fit with "you've lost your vision, you're truly blinded," and so on Dog's part. Likewise, Dog faces discrimination but just spouts about justice over and over again without trying to understand anyone else's point, and just blindly follows the head ghost Nazi despite actually possessing sight because he's brainwashed, showing that even those who can see are still blinded by the truth of deception, as well as alluding to how blind Ichigo himself is. First I'll use Bankai and then gets a Gatinsho. They'll never see that coming. Saying all revenge is bad was likewise silly on Dog's part because its merit is determined by the individual. It's just that it's typically not worth it most of the time, but the irony is that Komamura could never see another person's viewpoint because he was blinded by his own biased preconceived notions, and made it his mission to try and convert someone else by saying he'd make them see the good in the world again without ever trying to understand where Tosen was coming from. But that's the joke, and that they were both blinded in their own way, and that neither were right, while at the same time actually delivering a message on justice and revenge. It's A++ stuff and one of my favorite scenes, but even it doesn't quite compare to Strawberry's sisters. I would drown them in a bowl of my cup! But likewise, there are some shittier moments, like the entirety of the Xyloporo fight, because Kubo said he'd make this series last 15 years, and goddamn did he make sure it did, and got that fucking bag. What a fucking chat. That said, the only issue is that all of these events are made less impactful and muddied for the most part because of the poor presentation of the anime, and that's really bad for for a show that relies on its style, flair, and character writing. The anime is good at setting things up for future arcs, just like in the manga, as seen from the very early foreshadowing in the earlier episodes, and it also maintains the characterization for most of the characters, like Orihime, who remains as well written as she was in the manga, with how she stands firm on not being much of a fighter, yet still does her best to protect her friends in her own way, and even her enemies, because she sees and treats all life as equal. Orihime and the story itself is a lot more nuanced than most Bleach fans give it credit for, but don't give them too much shit online, cause they don't know how to read. It does not, however, keep Strawberry's characterization intact, as in the anime, he comes off as a punk kid who just seeks out fight after fight to prove himself in a similar manner to Kenpachi, and Strawberry even states as much to Grimmjow, but that's only part of his character. The other half is that him wanting to protect his friends is less so an excuse to fight, but something he actually means. It is very ego-driven, but he still genuinely wants to protect the people around him, and only ends up losing fights when he starts wearing his personal hang-ups on his sleeve. And that's why he seems so much stronger in the Soul Society arc as opposed to the Arrancar arc. Seeing his mom get eaten by a hollow affected him to the point where he wanted to get stronger, but as Tatsuki says, he was always a huge crybaby, and that doesn't really change just because he starts acting like a delinquent, and Orihime even sees through his delinquent act and thinks he's funny because of it. There's definitely a lot more to Ichigo and his character, but I'll save that for my You Didn't Understand Ichigo video. Are you fucking self-promoting? The issue with this, however, is that a lot of the scenes that portray this protect side of Ichigo early on are completely cut from the anime or hidden away within filler that most people would skip over and thus miss out on a key part of Ichigo's characterization. That's really dumb. In a character and story-driven show that's main entertainment stems from that, the rule of cool and fashion, having a poor anime adaptation like this one is detrimental. In a way, Fire Force is a more perfected and modern version of Bleach, wherein it got the adaptation it deserved that amplified and perfected its source material that was already a slight improvement over Bleach, like having multiple squads but not having 80+ characters despite that, and progressing the ones it does have naturally through the story, rather than all at once through a flashback in the middle of a goddamn fight, Haribel. The anime does have its moments, but it's an overall subpar product that doesn't really show what it's capable of until the Fullbring arc, which is absolutely fucking stellar. Oh no, there's all coming! Here the anime is properly paced, and the fights are animated and directed exquisitely, and even better, the music is played on fucking cue. We likewise get to see the conclusion of Ichigo's Protect character arc when Ginjo steals his powers after my best friend Tsukishima just got done mindfucking him. A bowl! But it's lackluster and more hilarious than anything to see Strawberry sob on the floor because the anime excluded the aforementioned important characterization for him, and so as a result, anime Strawberry comes off more as a whiny brat who's mad he can't fight anymore, rather than someone who is actually in shambles that he can't protect his friends and is worried he's just as weak as before, so they're all about to die in front of him just like his mother. Basically, he's got a fuck ton of trauma, just like me when I read my comment section. Although the anime may ruin the show on multiple levels, the writing itself was still solid, and the OST was an absolute fucking banger. Even if it never played on cue 90% of the time, it was still absolutely fantastic, and number one is easily one of the best character songs I've ever heard, as it excellently represents Ichigo as a character, as well as how he thinks and feels, that he has to be the center of attraction, and that he has to be number one to protect everyone. And it even doubles as something he sings in his head to hype himself up. Now you feel like number one. Honestly, despite how bad it is, I'm still very nostalgic for the original show, as it was a part of my childhood, mainly my teenage years, and I love a lot of the openings and still listen to and watch them to this day, with the last one making me cry like a bitch each and every time. It may have been extremely lackluster, but it did its job of getting so many people into the series, and the new season looks like an absolute goddamn banger. Just look at Bread Girl. God, I wish I were that bread. Click here for more videos and here for exclusive videos.